In today's analysis, we're stepping right into an absolute theological heavyweight clash. Seriously, we're going to look at the seemingly impossible fusion of two massive, incredibly complex esoteric systems, ancient Gnosticism and Lurianic Kabbalah. Now, you'll often see modern spiritual movements try to kind of blend these two together, mainly because, on the surface, they do share some structural similarities. But as we're going to see from our source material today, fundamentally fusing them without totally destroying the core essence of one or the other, it's a complete ontological contradiction. It's a fascinating debate, and I'm so excited to break this down for you.
Okay, let's dive right into this by looking at the absolute foundational difference between these two worldviews. On the left, we've got the ultimate Gnostic goal: completely escape the material world, which they view as a matrix, or basically a prison. And then on the right, the Kabbalist goal: to fix that matrix from within. This right here is our courtroom drama for today. We have two radically different answers to the whole problem of human existence. So let's start by hearing the prosecution's opening argument.
Act 1. The Gnostic Thesis. The world as a trap. For the ancient Gnostic, let's be clear, the material world isn't a school, and it is certainly not a blessing. It's a literal trap.
To really understand why they think this, we have to look at the identity of the Creator. While Kabbalah worships the God of the Old Testament, Gnostics identify this Creator as the Demiurge, also known in their ancient texts as Geldabaoth. According to texts from the Nag Hammadi library, this being is not the supreme light, not even close. Instead, he's a blind, arrogant, and lesser architect who, purely in his ignorance of the higher divine realm, falsely declared, "I am a jealous God, and there is no other God beside me." So to a Gnostic, harmonizing with Kabbalah means you are literally bowing down to the warden of a cosmic prison.
And because of this, Gnostics view the intricate mysticism of Kabbalah not as a path to freedom at all, but actually as a deceptive, archonic mechanism. It's an illusion. It's designed to keep your divine spark trapped. They argue that accepting Kabbalah requires this massive theological doublethink. You have to simultaneously believe that a perfectly good God created a world absolutely full of cruel suffering, and that divine justice comes from a deity who displays extreme cruelty in canonical texts. Gnosticism radically rejects this doublethink. They call it out as pure manipulation.
That is a really heavy, uncompromising accusation, right? So, playing the impartial mediator here, we have to ask, how would an educated Kabbalist, particularly from the highly developed Lurianic tradition, respond to these intense objections? Well, let's give the defense the floor.
Which brings us to Act 2, the Kabbalistic defense: repair, not escape. To a Kabbalist, the ultimate goal of existence is repair, definitely not escape.
The Kabbalist completely reframes this entire Gnostic nightmare. They argue that creation wasn't some arrogant mistake. See, before creation, there was only the infinite light of God, known as Ein Sof. For us to even exist with independent consciousness and free will, God had to withdraw into himself. This process, called Tinsum, created an empty space. So creation was actually born from God's profound desire to share. And what about the severity or, the jealousy of the Old Testament God? The Kabbalist says that's just one specific attribute, Gevura, or restriction, which is absolutely 100% necessary to balance out infinite divine mercy. Without it, the universe would just burn up in the light.
Let's move to the next point and see how this builds into their explanation for the actual origin of evil. The Kabbalist doesn't deny that there's darkness and suffering. Obviously, it's there. But they explain it through the concept of the shattering of the vessels. Essentially, divine light poured into vessels that simply couldn't hold the intensity, and they shattered. The divine sparks fell and became trapped in these shells, known as clipotes. So matter itself isn't inherently evil. It's really just a dense form of energy that has temporarily lost its connection with the source.
And this leads us to the absolute ultimate purpose of the soul in Kabbalah: Tikkun Olam, or the repair of the world. To the Kabbalist, listen, your soul didn't just fall into a physical body by some tragic mistake. No way. You were sent here intentionally, voluntarily, on a crucial mission. Earth is literally the only place where this repair can happen. Your job is to gather those fallen divine sparks from the material world and elevate them, actually becoming an active partner with the Creator.
I absolutely love this analogy from the source material because it just perfectly summarizes the defense. A Kabbalist would look right at a Gnostic and say, God doesn't need you to escape his workshop, he needs you to help finish it. The world isn't a prison to break out of, it is a broken workshop that we are meant to rebuild. If we all just escaped, nothing would be healed.
And this brilliantly illustrates the difference in how they view spiritual maps.
On the left, you have the Kabbalistic tree of life, which maps the descent of divine will into matter. It provides a path to harmonize the highest spiritual reality with the lowest physical reality. But then on the right, the Gnostic pleroma maps an immaterial home that exists entirely outside of the Creator's reach. A Gnostic isn't trying to harmonize with the spheres of this world. Actually, scratch that. They actively want to bypass them entirely. The Kabbalistic defense is deeply moving, right? It's philosophically cohesive and it offers real purpose in the face of suffering. But as our neutral mediator here, I've got to turn the floor back over. Can this beautiful argument about repairing the world actually convince a Gnostic? Welcome to Act 3, the Gnostic strike Stockholm Syndrome. Spoiler alert, they view the Kabbalistic defense as a literal form of Stockholm Syndrome.
The Gnostic looks at the Kabbalists' explanation and just calls it straight-up spiritual alibi-making. First off, they argue that allegorizing Old Testament cruelty, like taking acts of genocide or brutal punishments and trying to spin them into metaphors for divine restriction or cosmic justice, is sheer hypocrisy. To the Gnostic, evil is real. Excusing atrocities as mystical metaphors, that's the ultimate victory of archontic manipulation right there. Furthermore, they argue that monism, this idea that everything, even evil, is secretly part of God's good plan, completely destroys moral integrity. Because think about it, if everything is secretly good, then true evil doesn't exist, and morality totally loses its meaning.
The Gnostic also points out a really profound difference in how they view the divine feminine. Kabbalah features the Shekinah, the feminine divine presence. But the Gnostic argues that this is just a tamed version of femininity. It's artificially grafted onto a patriarchal tyrant, held captive within the matrix just to balance out his severity. In stark contrast, true Gnosis involves the untamed feminine principle, Barbello, or Sophia, who exists completely outside the demiurge's control. And she calls for complete liberation from the system, not a negotiation with it.
So, the crucial point really comes down to this. When the Kabbalah says, "Hey, help me finish the workshop," the Gnostic replies, "Why would I help a mad architect finish the prison I'm locked in?" To the Gnostic, the whole concept of tikkun olam, repairing the world, is literal spiritual Stockholm Syndrome. In their eyes, you have fallen in love with your jailer and the very walls that confine you. You can't sanctify an error, you can only abandon it.
And that brings us to our conclusion. 2 irreconcilable paths.
Now, what's really interesting about this slide is that it serves as the ultimate cheat sheet for this entire philosophical debate. Just look at the stark contrast here. The Creator is either a tyrannical warden or the infinite light. Matter's either a tragic prison you need to flee or it's a broken workshop just waiting for our hands to fix it. And the ultimate destiny of your soul, it's either to break out in an act of final defiant escape or to partner with God to repair reality itself.
It leaves us with a profound mystery about the nature of our own existence. As you go about your life, facing the challenges and, let's be real, the suffering of the material world, which lens makes more sense to you? Are we prisoners meant to break out of the dark, or are we partners meant to illuminate it? It's a really heavy question, but an incredibly fascinating one to think about. Thank you so much for joining me for today's Explainer, and remember, keep questioning everything.